Welcome to our one-on-one video program, a three-part series brought to you by IQVIA. It's all about the patients, how access is disrupted. I'm here today with Ross Perak, Senior Principal, Market Access Center of Excellence at IQVIA. And today we're going to talk about overcoming the launch access barriers with patient support programs. Hi, Ross. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well, Taryn. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Ross, what access challenges and support programs are especially relevant at launch?
Well, both challenges and support programs have evolved dramatically at launch over the last decade or more. It's especially difficult these days for launch brands as they enter an environment where it's no longer just a challenge or question of patient affordability and getting patients to afford therapy. Now the major challenge has really become getting patients approved for therapy in the first place by their payers. So to actually get approved, there have been a plethora of launch programs that have been brought into place beyond just the basic copay cards or the bridge programs that used to be enough to get the patients on therapy. One of the major challenges with payers blocking patients at launch is something we refer to as HCP fatigue. It's bad enough that patients are not receiving the therapies they need, but then the HCPs will become tired of writing prescriptions when the patients aren't actually able to fill. And so this is kind of call it a double whammy at launch. First, certain patients aren't getting approved. Second, you have an impact on physician writing. A little data point from 2019 is that only a third of patients were able to get on or fill newly launched therapies that year. Half of these were due to being blocked or rejected by payers, and then the rest were because patients abandoned therapy, often due to cost.
Wow, that's a big number. So talk to me about how access and support strategies are different for launch versus mature brands. What are those differences?
Sure. So the differences are it can be thought of as a value versus volume trade-off. And this is a theme that's come up a lot lately, which is at launch, the interest is in patient acquisition. How do we get as much volume as possible with short-term margin trade-offs to acquire those patients and avoid the challenges of payers' lack of approvals or affordability issues. For mature brands, as a therapy levels off, reaches peak, then the focus becomes more on value. How do we optimize the value and ensure that now that we've hit our top volume, we can optimize that gross to net? So short-term programs like bridge programs, vouchers, denial conversion programs, they can help get patients on therapy, and they're better for the HCPs too, because as the HCPs write, these patients are not being turned away at the pharmacy. That's short-term, but now long-term, this can erode margins. It can become unsustainable. And the challenge is that if the appropriate planning is not done, and these launch programs are maintained with all of the gross to net issues that we see, this can really compound and cause a value to wane. So the manufacturer has to make sure programs work together to acquire patients. It's all about the patient acquisition. And then how do you transition those patients to coverage, right? And so since margins are already thin, you have to, and by the way, manufacturers are dealing with things, especially in specialty areas like accumulators, maximizers, and other strains on the budgets. So these all work together to make it critical that an exit strategy from these launch programs is planned. No exit strategy for temporary fixes at launch is dangerous, frankly.
Wow. We all know that the launch is the most important time frame for a brand. So what are the elements that make for a successful support strategy at launch if we have to think about those volume versus value components?
Sure. So successful strategies, they have a certain agility or adaptability to them because because of the ever-changing patient needs, particularly at launch. So with these needs, again, they used to be based almost solely on affordability. And this question about coverage wasn't that big of an issue a decade ago. These days, it's a lot different. And it's not just the affordability. It's not just payers blocking at launch with excluded policies that have emerged in the past 6 years or so. But how about patients that are facing some strict PAs at the beginning and the often inability of HCPs to overcome those PAs? You know, bridging patients to actual coverage once you have PA support programs such as Cover My Meds and other programs of that type, or you can use savings cards that have an element that get patients past their PAs. Not to mention, you have to prepare for a variety of challenges like unexpected accumulator maximizers, as I mentioned a minute ago, poorer coverage than expected. So if you had planned for a certain level of coverage and you're not there, how do you react to this with patient support? And finally, health policy curveballs. There are certain potential policies on the table today that should be really concerning to manufacturers and that absolutely need to be planned for. So using evidence and doing scenario planning is critical, and these are key characteristics of a good strategy. These can allow a manufacturer to anticipate or model what good looks like. Okay? They can anticipate formulary wins and how programs that are bridging patients to coverage are going to go away once those formulary wins are in place. And with the appropriate planning, a manufacturer can come out with the right value for a brand, right? So another item is that geographic footprint is important for targeting. So understand, you know, are there going to be areas where your access footprint is more favorable or less favorable? That can help you target certain types of launch patient assistance programs to ensure the optimal patient acquisition. And so finally, something I just mentioned, what does good look like? Well, the definition of success is really down to that core question of where the margin costs and the volume gain. And how do you change your programs over time to address these? What is that interplay between the market access or payer strategy and your patient assistance strategy? And how can they be closely linked to ensure that you're getting the best volume at launch, but ultimately going on to the best net value beyond?
Ross, thank you so much for distilling such a complex equation down to making it understandable about what is important for the launch strategy for patient support programs. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Karen.